Welcome back to the Reboot Show. I'm Sally Illingworth, your host, and I'm excited because today I'm joined by three panelists to have a conversation about process automation and what it actually means in the context of business. Today, we're joined by Mark Gualano, who is a process engineer in the banking and finance industry. We're also joined by Lucas Meadowcroft, who is a Chief Visionary Officer and co-founder of Crofty Innovation and IT Support. And we're also joined by Luke Stow, who is our resident technology panelist here at the Reboot Show. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Sally.
Thanks very much for having us.
Beautiful. To get started, we might actually start with you, Lucas, and it'd be great to hear from you just to set the scene for the audience today. What's the role of process automation for business?
Yeah, so it's a super interesting question and jumping straight into around process automation, right? So when organizations think about innovating or think about bringing innovation into their organization, they don't usually think about process automation, but it's an actual key perspective and starting point for any business really to go onto the journey around disrupting or digital disruption within their organizational industry. And so process automation in essence is simplifying the way things are done every day in the business. So if you look at all the employees across all the different departments, there's so much manual handling still happening on a daily basis that actually machines or technology can do in replace of this manual process. And so if we can replace manual tasks, it actually means we can add more value to the customer or to the actual company they're working for.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, you typically don't prioritize process automation maybe when you're first getting started. And I'd like to dissect that a little bit more. So maybe we might go to you, Mark. And when a business has realized that maybe they need to prioritize process automation in their business, where do they even begin to start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They really want to start as from where they are in wherever future states they are. So firstly, we want to get an understanding of the context of their baseline. So to be able to do that, we start with process automation, which is with a thing called bots. We start to actually put bots onto the computers within the business, and we start to look at all of the mundane tasks that are done in a daily activity on those PCs. Within a very short period of time, we can collect hundreds of lines of data and really start to dissect that data and understand where we're going to pinpoint the areas for automation. And that's where we really start from a key point of view.
So in terms of getting started, you mentioned that you focus on maybe some of the mundane tasks to start with and use bot technologies to start maybe tracking and identifying where automation can really play a role. So I can imagine, even though they are mundane tasks, a human before process automation comes into play is doing this. So I can imagine there's typically a lot of resistance potentially to that. So Luke, what are your thoughts on maybe why there is resistance, if there is, around adoption of process automation for the employees?
Yeah, usually it's because people just start doing it and they don't inform their employees, their workforce, their contractors, why they're doing this. And I think what's really important here is that you're setting the right narrative. The process automation is about automating tasks and activities to make things better for the employee, better for the customer, as Lucas said. And, that should be really messaged well to the organization, because after all, this is about people and it's about making sure that everyone's really comfortable with what's about to transpire. So I think messaging is really important in this, and leaders playing that role in ensuring that there's a really strong tie-in to, hey, this is not about your jobs. This is about making things better for you and for our customers.
Yeah, I love the emphasis of sort of bringing everyone along on that journey. It'd be great to hear from you, Lucas, around how important is the process owner, if you like, in terms of supporting the process in which the processes they're doing actually become automated? Do they play a critical role, and therefore are they important in that implementation process?
People is everything in any organization, right? And so Mark touched on before around rolling out bots to understand the data that's actually happening on these devices. We like to flip it on its head, because that's what we used to start with back in the day. What we realized early on in the journey is businesses don't understand the outcome, what's going to be achieved, and the employees don't come along for the journey and come along for the ride. And so we literally like to flip it on its head and start with people. And so the first thing we ever do when we take on a new client is we interview every single person in the company, one-on-one, good 45-minute session. Do we need to do that? To be honest, no, we probably don't. We probably can just roll out bots. But if we found that if we don't have that one-on-one conversation. We don't bring the person along for the journey, which means you get to the end, you get to the outcome around automating all these mundane tasks, and they just think we're replacing them as an employee. And that's the worst thing that can happen in business. And so we need to get them on board, build that relationship, bring them along for the journey. Then they understand why we're doing what we're doing. Because typically business owners or leaders or C-level execs, sometimes it could be just related to the bottom line. And so bottom line to staff means nothing. And so we have to be that translation piece in the middle to then the actual employees know why they're there, why they exist, and what they can actually add more value to both internal communication collaboration, but also externally to the customer.
Yeah, I think you raised a really good point around ensuring everyone understands why it's actually happening. On that note, it'd be great to hear from you, Mark. I know you mentioned the use of certain bot technology to support that sort of strategy development around process automation. But once you've established that you do want to start automating processes, what are some of the key outcomes that businesses are usually trying to achieve through process automation?
Yeah, some of the key outcomes, it sort of comes back to what both Lucas and Luke was explaining, is that it's really about the people bringing them along. It's really about empowering them and moving them on from those tasks where it's repetitive transactional type tasks to be spending more time with customers, to be spending more time on value-added work within the business, trying to expand the business and those types of things. So it's not really about just a matter of removing those things or wastes. It's about then supplementing those wastes with really good work that may come out. And some of the things that I've seen from experience is, like 4 and 5 times faster throughput for transactions, which then leaves a lot more time for more sales, exploring different avenues the business can go with. And that's really where you see the innovation cycles start to come onto play. It's not sitting down in the weeds doing the tasks as they come in. It's about getting out there and improving the business and improving the bottom line.
Yeah, see, I can imagine though, as you start to work through this process, and we're really highlighting here that the customer and both the employee should really be at the forefront of all of these decisions. But Luke, I can imagine there are some competing interests between C-suite leadership or even the board, customers, employees. They all want different things out of process automation. So how can you even begin to try and manage maybe potentially conflicting interests around the benefits of process automation and what it actually means for each stakeholder?
Great part of the conversation is that, traditional management structures have usually been built around functions. So, I'm in finance, I'm in HR, I'm in IT, I'm in part of the business, maybe engineering. And so therefore process sort of takes a back seat. It's not featured, highlighted within corporate structures. But what is really important there is that process basically carries the business. It makes the business what it is from an operational point of view. So you have a lot of institutionalized behavior around process. So it's natural that there is these competing priorities. But I think what's really crucial here is, like, what are we looking at achieving? What are we trying to achieve by looking at our business and looking at our operational models, and how do we improve it? And of course, then that's when process kicks in. Of course, data is really important. That's like the goal. But I think you only get very good data models coming out of really clean process. So whether it be a value chain at the macro level where we're trying to look at how can we be more efficient and more effective, or how can we service customers better, or how can we take products to market better, I actually think they're all the same thing. You just got to do what's right for the organization and look at those process models and say, how do we make this better? For everyone. Better to make it more efficient. That way the CFO's happy, because let's face it, they're never happy unless they're getting efficiencies, Mark. But then also customers get happier because things are easier and they're better to navigate their way through. So I think from a tech point of view, process plays a really critical part.
And so in terms of getting started with this and trying to ensure that you can align the objectives, if you like, and the buy-in from all of these key stakeholders, Lucas, what's the most important thing to consider before you get started? Is it thinking about what technology you're going to use to actually automate processes? Is it thinking about what sort of people you have in the business to lead that change management process? Where do you start? What's the most important thing to actually start developing a process automation strategy?
Yeah, I think Luke hit the nail on the head before around you're talking about this buy-in from the different leadership and leadership structures and styles from the board down. I guess this is where we build our IP around interviewing staff members to get that buy-in. We also ended up going to the nth degree and interviewing all the board members. And so once we understood what the board members wanted, the C-level suite wanted, the departments had, the team leaders, all the way through down to the bottom level employees, we understood that actually, in a core essence, everyone wants the same thing. They all want the same outcome. They just don't know how to talk and communicate with each other and explain that they want that same outcome. Once you understand that, then you can go to the next stage, which is what you're talking about. Let's put that through a bit of methodology around process improvement. So in this case, business analysis, creating process maps around the different divisions, different departments, join them all together. Then we can go to market and find the best technology on the market. Because we're building a process map and a requirements list based on what the company needs, we're finding the latest, greatest tech to solve that particular process functionality. We're not saying, hey, this is the latest tech on the market, let's try and squeeze it in the business. Not at all. That's the last thing you want to do. You want to find the latest and greatest tech to solve the actual process. And so if you follow that methodology, we've found, 9.5 times out of 10, you'll get a really good outcome. But it's only when you get those leaders out that doesn't matter what you say or do, they want to implement something because their best friends told them that technology is the best in the world. That's when it doesn't work, because you're trying to squeeze something into your business that just doesn't happen. And when we say we go to market to find the best and latest, greatest tech, it might be multiple different tech stacks and different systems across the planet. We're not just, we say Western world here because it's English speaking systems, typically in Australia, New Zealand, that we go for. But we're playing in Israel and the UK and in all different European countries through to US. You're finding like these really cool startup hubs that have just been invested into by 10 mil, 50 mil, 100 mil investment into these companies that have amazing technology, but no one knows about them, because unless you're really researching that core functionality problem in your business, you're not searching for an ERP system or a sales system. Like, you're really going detail, and then you can find that technology that's amazing, implement that to the business, and that's when you'll see the great ROI for the organization as a whole.
Yeah, and I think in terms of looking at procuring tech stacks to use as you're seeking to automate processes, you raise a really good point, which is usually that legacy approach that your friend at a business meeting told you this is the best tech to go with. So it's the default, it's what everyone's using. But you're also probably missing out on some of these new innovative technologies that can actually offer a better service as you're working to automate processes. In your experience, Mark, coming from the finance and banking industry, my understanding is that fintech, as an example, has really done a lot in recent years in terms of automating processes, which has completely transformed that industry. To Lucas's point, what are some of the technologies that, I know you mentioned bot technologies, but what are some other technologies that you've seen that can be used to help develop the strategy around process automation?
Yeah, look, for me and what I'm working in right now is looking at really that end-to-end chain of everything from the start of the process right through to the customer, and starting with the customer view and looking backwards. So when we're looking at a stack to build out, or technologies to build up, we first need to start with that end-to-end management flow. So we need to get a tool that's going to help us understand all of the pieces of the pie, and we need to understand what are those transition points between all the different silos. So we need to start with some sort of workflow engine and rules engine. That's really with our base starting point. The second part is, well, then how do we actually make sure that those rules and understanding is actually going to work for us? And that's where the bots sort of come in to pinpoint the parts of the business where we need to start. And then we need to start looking at what are the ways that we can actually start connecting those siloed areas together. And that's where we start to look at actually AI technology and the automation process between those processes. So we're really trying to slowly build out a complete model and an understanding of end-to-end, where all our problems are, what pieces of the pie we're going to pull out and substitute in. And it really needs to be a modular stack that we actually build out. So if a technology might be great today, but in a year's time or 2 years' time, that might be obsolete, and there might be something much better. The technology is moving so fast, as you were saying, with this tech startups and things like that. As those technologies start to come out, we can actually pull those out and plug in those new systems. We may still have some old legacy type systems that we have to work with, Again, on one of the jobs that I'm working on at the moment, we have a legacy engine that we calculation engine that we're working with, but we're making sure that everything around it is new and it's only doing what it needs to do. And all the workflow systems around are to the latest technology and trying to transition and make those transactions as fast as possible, and to really give back time to, in this case, our bankers, to try and really understand and make those sales that they're trying to push forward through.
I love that you mentioned a particular legacy system, making sure that it's only doing what it needs to do. And I think, you know, at a business leadership level, Luke, it'd be great to hear from you on this. You know, I think this can be quite an overwhelming process, particularly if you haven't always prioritized process automation and maybe you're just getting started. And by this point, you're a large corporation. So I can imagine with that overwhelm, some business leaders think that, okay, if we're going to adopt process automation, let's just automate everything in the business. So what are we seeing in terms of particular business functions that are maybe seeing greater demand for process automation because we've seen it work in other industries, for example?
Yeah, look, it's right across the board. I think all functions today are looking at how do they automate process to make a difference for the functions they're doing. So take finance, accounts payable, receivable was probably the place this started. We were just thinking about how do we make processes more efficient, not rely on, you know, the manual entry, the keystroke errors, the amount of duplication that happens, and how do we make that process smoother? So it started with the US banks actually outsourcing a lot of their process development work into different markets. And then those suppliers actually looking at these from a lean or Six Sigma point of view and saying, I now understand how this process works and I can see the critical path, and how do I start to automate that to make a difference to our end customers, our employees? And I think that then grew into all facets of business. So, you know, you can talk about very engineering complex processes that are around aviation, for example, where they're becoming much more automated in the way that they're refueling, repackaging with food, you know, getting ready for the next flight. How do we automate those processes? Right through to customer and service models. And I think this is where the interest lies. If you're a big organization, you want standardization. You want standardization because it's good for employees, because you can show them how to do the job. They're clear about what you're asking them to do, and they can see how it connects into the overall arching process that you're trying to run. For smaller organizations, they're interested about how do I become effective from a servicing point of view. So service models become very important. And I like what Lucas is doing with Crofty, because I think this is a really growing part of the process automation economy. How do we take traditional things like a service desk and automate it to make it more effective in servicing the people that are asking for help? How do we do that more efficiently, more cleanly, with more repeatability and more institutionalization around how that works so that people understand how these processes work? One of the things I see a lot in organizations is people scratching their head who work there saying, I've got no idea how to work in this environment. I don't have any process documentation. No one has ever shown me how to do my job. I just turned up here one day and the guy beside me told me how to do it.
Yeah.
So this is a really strange place for people to be. So it comes back to people.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, right? I love that you raise service capability and how important that is. And this should always, process automation, as well as anything that you do in a business, really should be working to serve the experience of the customer, because ultimately they're the reason you're in business. They give you some sort of economic purpose. So it'd be great to hear from you, Lucas. Do you believe that process automation, in thinking about the customer, does it always work to the benefit of the customer? And how can we make sure that it always does? What do we need to do? I know we've spoken about getting the buy-in from all key stakeholders, but practically, what can we be thinking about doing to ensure it works to the benefit of the customer?
Yeah, I'll go into some hot topics that we're actually working on at the moment, but I just have to go back to your point, Luke, around, getting, actually putting process improvement into these organizations and what the process looks around actually doing that. And it's surprising, like we go into organizations that have been running for 100 plus years, they've got staff members still there for 30 plus years, and you ask them the question around, what you just mentioned, why do you do what you do? So that's what I've always done.
Yeah.
Sure. So why do you do it? It's what I've always done. And you're like, oh my God. So people actually haven't even thought about it or given the opportunity to think about how to do things differently. Anyway, it still surprises me every single day of the week.
Kind of automation, right? They get into autopilot mode just because that's what they're trained to do and conditioned to do in the business.
Yeah, we went to a client last week, and there's 3 people that literally data entry into spreadsheets. Then it goes to the next person, they data entry. Goes to the next person, they data entry. That goes to another department. They do it. And like, you're duplicating the same information 4 times. What are you doing? That's what we've always done. What are you talking about? Anyway, if we're talking about how it can benefit the consumer or the customer at the end of the day, there's some amazing technology, and this might go into 2 different conversations here. There's amazing tech on the market, if we're talking about artificial intelligence or machine learning, deep learning, where it knows the customer better than you know the customer, right? And so you can roll this tech out, do a consumer interface to really understand how they're thinking, where they're located, what they're trying to achieve, what do they want to buy, what do they not want to buy. We as business owners get stuck in our own old ways and own ways of what we think the customer wants or needs. It's completely changed. Even if we don't think about COVID, look at the last 3 to 5 years of the way that consumers buy these days. Everything's at their fingertips. They can research everything they need to research. They might know more about you and your product than you know about yourself. So you need to listen to the customer. And so we can use some great tech on the market that actually does that insight for you, as long as you take that insight and actually do something with that insight. The amount of times you hand over these reports to organizations, you go, cool, this is actually what your customer thinks about you. This is actually what they think about your product. Like, cool, yeah, but we don't care about those customers. They're your customers, seriously. And so, sorry?
They're going to pay the bills. They pay the bills at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. I love the case study. I don't know if you've heard of Albert AI. It's a marketing tool if we're talking about consumers, typically in the larger corporate enterprise space, but there's a really cool tech in the SME space now called Lighthouse 8. Anyway, it's all about marketing and consumer insight into your product for your customer. And because it's all machine learning, it just pulls this information in, right? And so the really cool case study with Red Balloon, where they were able to find markets they didn't think that would ever exist. Sorry, Siri's going off at me. They thought they would find markets that didn't even exist, where they were like, well, we've never had customers in Tasmania, so we never thought to even market there, or we tried market there, it didn't work. This machine goes and finds these really small pockets and niches of demographics that now they're one of the best customers. So use it to your benefit to gain customers. Like we just rolled out one of our platforms. We didn't even know this before we even launched, but our main demographic is Netherlands and Germany. We would never have thought.
So you're suggesting, sorry, that by using some of these technologies, you can uncover new sort of economic opportunity when you're working to automate processes by simply doing that customer-facing research, focusing on the customer, and you may actually discover some new opportunities that you didn't expect to find.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And if you think about the flip side of it, to answer your question originally, sorry, I got off a bit off track there, is when we understand the internal processes in the business, we actually can come up with what we call the golden nuggets, which is we might have a service or a product that we've been sitting on for many years that we're not selling or we're giving away for free. We can actually productize that complete service, productize that idea that we've been sitting on, because consumers want it, they want to pay for it. We just need to productize it to give it to them. And so it works in both from an internal to external and external to internal.
So thinking about different industries and sort of maybe there are certain industries that have already started to perform better and sort of lead the way for process automation, if you like. Mark, what are your thoughts on what industries maybe, or even if disciplines are really driving adoption of process automation that other disciplines or other industries can learn from?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's probably sort of 2 answers to it. The first answer I would say is that it's definitely your big players in the market. So here in Australia, it's your telcos and your big 4 banks that are actually looking at these types of things. And the reason why is because they're of the scale. You're talking about some of the big 4 banks. You're talking about 60,000 employees, 100,000 employees. If they're all doing like an alt tab or something like that, every couple of minutes, you work out the amount of time saving that you can make from just implementing a small improvement in that specific point. But coming back to the main part is that the telcos are more looking at from that end-to-end view, and they've been, one of the telcos in Australia has implemented 35,000 robotic improvements along all their systems, and that's allowed them to scale huge amounts compared to other industries. And it's only works out to be those types of large scale implementations and where they're actually getting huge benefits out of robotic automation is about 4% of the total market. So 4% of industries are actually doing it, what I would say, well, or on the edge of getting it done right, and everybody else is all lagging behind. So, I mean, obviously there's a large volumes, and therefore the scale is quite big. But we can see that process automation, it needs to have that end-to-end view to really get good outcomes. So it's not just a matter of I can put one bot in here and one bot in there. That might be a starting point, but the idea is to have automation across your whole value chain. And so again, probably in banking, I know of another company that's got about 20,000 robotic automation processes that run through their end-to-end value chain. And it comes back to your point, Lucas, that by doing that, we can then start to expose some of those products and services that we've been, maybe someone's come up with a great idea, but we've never had the smarts to actually get it out on the market. The other thing is too, also another project that I've been associated with is actually the development of those products. So shortening the product evaluation time. So looking at those types of processes as well as the innovation process to improve that to get out faster to market. So there's a whole lot of leading things that we can see in the telco and banking in Australia. Obviously in other businesses, probably more in automation in terms of robotic automation, real robots is probably more about your German car manufacturing and those types of things, where it really sort of started years back ago.
So when we think about some of the larger players, at least in the Australian market, sort of driving adoption of process automation and leading the way for other industries, I mean, even Mark, when you mentioned about this 35,000 or thereabouts, processes that are automated through use of robotics, etc. I mean, for the average employee, this is quite daunting. This is quite overwhelming. And I can imagine many employees ask themselves, what's my role going to be in the future if you can effectively automate 35,000 processes within an organization? So, Luke, what does this mean for the future of work? And do you think people are nervous that potentially they'll be rendered useless because of process automation?
I'm so happy you asked me that question, because I can see the movie like The Terminator where they're all robots and there's no human beings. No, that's not going to happen. Basically, I think there's a lot of scaremongering around this, and I think we just need to really come back to this. There's two lenses to this that I want to apply. First is, if you work in a corporation or a company, process automation is going to be key, and it's going to happen. So it's not about replacing jobs, it's about replacing tasks and activities and making them more automated and more acceptable for the employee and the customer. And if that's the view, then that's going to work for the organization. And sure, there will be some jobs that will probably not exist in the future work models as this starts to evolve. But those people should be redeployed into other things. So if you're embracing this as a person and you're helping, then this is going to be part and parcel of where you go moving forward. Process is definitely a skill that you should be looking at adopting as part of your capability, as well as AI and all the data scientists that we quite often get fascinated by. From a startup community though, do you think unicorns exist because they haven't changed process? Can disruption occur without changing process? No, it cannot. It cannot. So basically startups and entrepreneurs are all about how do we disrupt the process, the macro process? How do we make it shorter, better? How do we automate things? How do we put technology in there to make a difference for how things operate from an operational and a customer point of view? So I think these things are quite exciting for both startups, small to medium enterprises and big organizations. And if I was picking a team tomorrow in a new business, process people would be the first people I'd pick. Not data people, sorry data people, process people, because this is the way that we reshape the way we work.
Just because I'm a fan of data, I will raise the point that we were discussing earlier the importance of data in terms of supporting the process automation, strategy development, etc. So data is very, very important.
Yeah, it is, Sally, but I just wanted to make that point.
So the moral of the story in terms of people within the context of the future of the work is don't be nervous, consider using it as an opportunity to enhance your own skill set and sort of, better position yourself within an organization based on what the future of work looks like.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. So maybe as we work to wrap this up on that energetic note, and I love your reference to the unicorn concept in the startup landscape, it'd be great to hear from each of you, and we might start with yourself, Lucas, around what does the future of process automation look like, particularly when we think about 5G and the enablements that that's going to offer us when it comes to whether it's, speed, efficiencies, cost efficiencies, et cetera.
And 100% goes to Luke's comment before is, when we talk about startup or the startup ecosystem and this whole unicorns and whatever the next generation is after this, it's the conversation always comes around. People ask me this all the time. We're just lazy. If I have to do something twice, I friggin' automate it. It's so simple. Like, it's not like we're trying to reinvent the wheel or disrupt industries. Yeah, okay, that's the fun side of it. No, it's just because we're absolute lazy. We just don't want to do things twice. And so if you look at any process, any spreadsheet, any data that you're pushing through from start to finish, if you have to do something twice in one day, automate it. Simple as that. If we're talking about the future of work, and I love this topic, and this could be an entire segment on its own, really short and sweet. By 2030, it's only a couple of, 10 years away. I reckon it's going to be sooner, but let's say by 2030, 50% of the entire Western population will be freelancers. Now that's super interesting to think about, right? Because if we talk about 5G technology, where we can work from anywhere absolutely in the world, and COVID's proof to that. As long as we've got internet connection, we have a laptop, we're good to go. And so if we think, well, what does freelancers mean? Because people usually think freelancers, graphic designers and website developers and that type of thing. You can be a freelance in any industry, in any role, in any aspect of business or employment, right? And so there's no reason why a company of a size of 60,000 employees couldn't have 20,000 employees and the rest made up of freelancers. There's no reason why it couldn't happen. Because as we start putting process automation into careers, into roles, into businesses, it just means that it spurts off different new industries, new career paths, new opportunities for people to learn and to evolve into. And at the end of the day, millennials that you get on board, if you've ever hired a millennial before in your life, they don't want to do mundane stuff. They want to do exciting things. So you want to give them the opportunity to go in a different direction that you've never gone to before.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating statistic around the portion of freelancers in the workforce. That's going to be very, very interesting to see actually come to life. It'd be great to hear from you, Mark, as well, in closing, what you think the future of process automation looks like.
So it was a really good point that Lucas made. I want to touch on that just for the moment. The main thing here is that people don't want to do things twice. Customers want to be able to do things once. They want to do them fast. They want to be able to move on to their next task, whatever they may be doing that day. So how do we make that happen? And that's really where the innovation cycles sort of come into play, where I was talking about before, is that if all of our background tasks in our transactions are automated or mostly automated, it allows that time to look at innovation. It allows that time for us to come up with those new products and services. And so you start to getting a bit of more, as that snowball starts to move and you continually start producing these new types of systems and processes and products, you'll then see an exponential growth in that area. And so you can see it in some industries already, where they might come out with one product and then all of a sudden they come out with 5 or 6 products, and then 7 or 8, and it just keeps doubling and tripling as they go, because they're already on that trajectory. And that's what we're seeing from like the new players in the marketing and those startups. That's what you get. But whereas the more traditional businesses are still sort of that really big wheel, they're slowly turning it and not getting those services out fast enough. And the other thing is also about, some of the products may not work. That's fine. Shut those down, get rid of them, start up some new ones. So it's really about that momentum. I see that the way that we're going to work in the future is that you'll see it's more about innovation and human capital rather than the standard tasks that you would normally see traditionally for the last 100 odd years.
I love the focus on human capital. And I know Amy Smith, our co-host of the Reboot Show, will love that. She's always talking about things like process automation, enabling the human to do more meaningful work. Luke, it'd be great to hear from you as well around what the future of process automation looks like. I know that you've mentioned before on the show, you're excited about autonomous vehicles, so you don't have to be in a car with myself. So what are you excited about when it comes to process automation?
Oh, look, I'm excited about everything process. You know that. I could wear a t-shirt with process on it. I just love thinking about how process is going to evolve. And what I think is really exciting is all the different types of technologies we now have at our disposal. You know, once you've got your process mapped out, there are so many tools that you can use to automate and to get benefit out of those process redesigns. And I think a key message I want to give is you don't have to start big, just start small. Just start by documenting and encouraging your people to be process minded so that they can make the changes themselves, empower them to be able to go and make change. It's one of the best things you can do for your employers.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly very excited. And by the sounds of it, there's not many things that I'm going to have to do more than once in my life after this conversation. So the pressure is on. Thank you very much to our panelists today, Mark, Lucas, and Luke. And we trust that the audience enjoyed this conversation as much as we did around what the future of process automation looks like and how you can start to approach process automation for your business. Please do make sure that you subscribe to the Reboot Show YouTube channel, and we will see you on the next segment. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Bye.